Hello and welcome to Uncommand Online Academy. In today's lesson, we want to continue with our discussion on classification of living things, and we are going to talk about the kingdom fungi. We are talking about the kingdom fungi today. In our previous lessons, we talked about the Monera, the kingdom Monera, and we've also talked about the kingdom Protista. So we are moving on to the kingdom fungi. We are going to learn the features, the characterizations or classifications, and examples of organisms that belong to the kingdom fungi. The kingdom fungi. The features of this kingdom is that they are eukaryotic, just like we said when we talked about Protista. Protista are the first eukaryotic organisms, meaning that they have a packaged nucleus. Their nuclear materials are packaged, or they have a nuclear membrane. Every eukaryotic organism has a nuclear membrane. It is the nuclear membrane that packages the nuclear material, or that encloses it and prevents it from coming out to the outer cell, or to be mixed with other contents of the cell. So fungi, they are eukaryotic organisms, meaning that they have a definite nucleus. Their nucleus is packaged. The kingdom fungi, the organisms there, they are also, some of them are unicellular, while others are multicellular or multicellular. So this is an advancement from the last kingdom we discussed, that is the Protista. The Protista are all unicellular, they are eukaryotic, and the Protista are all eukaryotic and unicellular, and that differentiates Protista from Monera. Monera, they are all prokaryotic, meaning that their nuclear materials are lying within the cell. They are not contained in any vessel, so they don't have any definite nucleus. That is for Monera. Then, but Protista, they have definite nucleus. They have a packaged nucleus, so they are eukaryotic. So Protista are the first eukaryotic, but they are also unicellular. All of them are unicellular, like the Moneras. Moneras are prokaryotic and unicellular. Fungi, Protista are eukaryotic and unicellular. Why the difference between the Protista and fungi is that fungi, they are eukaryotic, but some of them are multicellular. So we have both unicellular in fungi and multicellular organisms in fungi. So that is an advancement, and that is why we place fungi above Protista in ranking, or in the hierarchy of living things. Now, other features of fungi is that they have cell wall. Their cells are enclosed by what we call cell wall, and the cell wall is made up of a special substance called chitin, a special type of carbohydrate that we call chitin. So their cell wall is made up of chitin. If this is a cell, the outermost cover of the cell that protects everything inside the cell is called the cell wall. The cell wall is mostly present in plant cells, but fungi, they have also have cell wall, and their cell wall is a special type that is called, or that is made up of chitin. Animals, they don't have cell wall. It is only fungi and plants that have cell wall. So this is another feature of fungi. Then another feature of fungi is that they reproduce both sexually and asexually. In their sexual reproduction, they reproduce they reproduce both sexually and asexually. They produce through spores. There's something they produce called spores, and they can also reproduce through fission, through fragmentation, and through budding. Most of them contain what we call spores, and that is the primary source or primary means of reproduction in fungi. Then most fungi, they contain a thread-like structure that form their roots, and the thread-like structure is called hyphae. And when the hyphae come together, many of them, they form what we call mycelium. A network of the hyphae is called mycelium. So generally we represent a fungi as something like this. So if this is a fungi, this structure is called sporangium. This sporangium contains the spore. The spore is what it uses to reproduce, and when the sporangium is broken up, you will see small small particles inside it, and the small particles are what is called spores. So these small particles inside this sporangium, when it is broken up, they are called spores. So the spores can fall anywhere and they will start growing from that place. And that is how the fungi, most of them, reproduce. They reproduce through spore formation. When the spores are formed in the sporangium is broken up and the spores are scattered, and wherever they fall or wherever they land, they start to reproduce from there. So people that contact fungi diseases, most of them, it is the spore that fall on them that will start growing in their body. So that is how the fungi diseases are transmitted. You get the spore from somebody and the spore start to germinate or to grow in your body, or anywhere they fall, they start to germinate from that side. Then this side, this thing that looks like roots, this thread-like thing that looks like roots, this one is called hyphae. Hyphae. Then when all of them come together, many hyphae come together to form this mesh or this network, many of them, it is called mycelium. Mycelium. So this is generally how a fungi looks like. Now, classification of fungi. Fungi is actually classified into three major types. One, we have zygomycetes or zygomycota. We have ascomycetes or ascomycota, and we have basidiomycetes or basidiomycota. Let me write them. Okay, so these are different, or the three major types of fungi: zygomycetes or zygomycota, ascomycetes or ascomycota, and basidiomycetes, also called basidiomycota. Fungi generally are known as mycota. So when we put zygomycota, this one is showing the classification. So another name for the kingdom fungi is mycota. Now this zygomycota, this name, different names, zygomycota, ascomycota, basidiomycota, is talking about the different types of spores that different fungi produces. We have fungi that produce a type of spore that we call zygospore. So those type of fungi that produce zygospore, we call them zygomycota or zygomycetes. I told you in this structure that this place contains spores, the sporangium, and inside the sporangium we have spores. Now these spores can be of different forms. We have the ones we call zygospores. Those zygospores are produced by a type of fungi we call zygomycetes or zygomycota. Then we have another type of spore that we call ascospores. Those ones are produced by the type of fungi we call ascomycetes or ascomycota. Then we have another type of spore that we call basidiospores. The basidiospores are produced by the type of fungi we call basidiomycetes or basidiomycota. I say that basidiospores are produced by basidiomycetes or basidiomycota. So the different forms of spores that we have, they are zygospores by zygomycota, ascospores by ascomycota, and basidiospores by basidiomycota. So these are different classifications of fungi. Now I want also to discuss the relationship that exists in fungi. Fungi, the way they relate with other organisms, they can relate with other organisms in three different ways. Mostly, we have saprophytic fungi, we have parasitic fungi, and we have the symbiotic fungi. Saprophytic. Now fungi, you should know, is generally heterotrophic. I've said it that a heterotrophic organism, they depend on another organism for their food. That is, they cannot make their own food. Plant is autotrophic organism because they can manufacture their own food. But fungi, they cannot manufacture their own food. So they are heterotrophic. Now, because they are heterotrophic, they relate with other organisms. They have to relate with other organisms in order to obtain their energy. And this relationship, they have three major relationships or three ways they can relate with other organisms. Number one is saprophytic. Saprophytic relationship is the relationship whereby these fungi, they feed on dead organisms. So they help organisms that are dead to decay by feeding on them. So those ones are called saprophytes. Then we have fungi that are parasitic. They live inside another organism, a living organism like a plant or animal, where they cause diseases by feeding on those living organisms. In this case, the living organism they are living in, they are not benefiting anything from them, that are just causing diseases, like the organism causing dandruff and other fungal diseases, candidiasis, that is yeast, and some other diseases, sexually transmitted diseases in the body. Most of them are caused by fungi. Even athlete foods is also caused by fungi. And one major thing about fungal disease is that they are very, very hard to treat. They are recalcitrant. You have to treat them for a very long time before you can cure them. It is very hard to contact fungal disease, but once you get them, it will be very, very hard for you to cure them. So these ones are called parasitic fungi. Then we have symbiotic fungi. The symbiotic fungi live with other organisms. They benefit, and that organism they are living with also benefits. A typical example is the one we call lichen. Lichen. Lichen is when a fungi is staying together with a special type of fungi is staying together with another organism called algae. Algae we discussed when we talked about protista. So when one special type of fungi called mycorrhiza there is a fungi called mycorrhiza. When this fungi is staying with algae, we call the relationship lichen. In lichen, the fungi, the mycorrhiza, provides shelter for the algae so that the algae will not dry up. The algae needs water to stay alive. It needs adequate water to stay alive, so it provides shelter that prevents it from desiccation, while the algae manufactures food for the mycorrhiza or for the fungi. So two of them benefit in this lichen or in this symbiotic relationship. So it may come out in exam and they will ask you what is a lichen. So you say that lichen is a symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi, or if you can remember the name of the fungi, which is the mycorrhiza, I cannot say that it is algae and mycorrhiza. If you cannot remember the name of this fungi, you just say that it is a relationship between algae and fungi. Or they can also tell you that the relationship between the algae and fungi is called what? It is lichen, and it is a symbiotic relationship. Now, common examples of fungi are mushroom, we have Penicillium notatum. Penicillium is a special type of fungi, or is an example of fungi. So the penicillin that you give people that have wound to heal it, it is actually a fungi that is used to produce, or that is made into a medicine. So the people that produce penicillin ointments, they have, or they use this fungi, Penicillium notatum. They grow it, and after growing the Penicillium notatum, they will harvest it and then synthesize certain parts of it. They will now use it to produce the ointment that you use to treat yourself. So penicillin is a fungi. Penicillium. Penicillium. Then aspergillus is also a fungi. Aspergillus is also a fungi. The yeasts that grow, or the yeast that we see also in palm wine, it is also a fungi. We don't see yeast in fungi. We see yeast grow in different things. Some people have yeast in their eye, and palm wine helps to clear it. Number 5. Also, another yeast is Candida. There is a special yeast that grows in human being. It is a sexually transmitted microorganism. It is called Candida. And most sexually transmitted diseases are fungi. Candida. Candida causes candidiasis. Mold is also a fungi. Mold looks like a small ball, whitish small ball that grows on dead matter. You would have seen it when trees die. You see some small balls, whites, that are growing on them. Not mushroom, that are small balls like this, growing on the dead plants. They are called mold. So these are examples of fungi: mushroom, penicillium, aspergillus, yeasts, and mold. So with this, we have come to the end of our discussion on fungi. And as a recap, we've talked about the features of fungi. We also described the structure of fungi. We said that fungi, they are eukaryotic, and some are unicellular while others are multicellular, and that they have cell wall that is made up of chitin, and that they reproduce using their spores, and that the spores actually are of different types: zygospores, ascospores, and basidiospores, and that these different types of spores that it produces gives rise to different classes of these fungi, which we now have the zygomycete or zygomycota, the ascomycete or ascomycota, and basidiomycete or basidiomycota. And we also talked about the structure of the fungi. The structure that contains the spores is called sporangium. That is the container for spores, the sporangium. Then we have hyphae, which is something that looks at the root of the fungi. And when the hyphae come together, they form what we call mycelium. And then we talked about their relationship with other organisms. We say that some of them are saprophytes, feeding on dead matters. Some of them are parasitic, feeding on living organisms why the living organisms are not benefiting anything, why others are symbiotic, living with other organisms, they benefit and those organisms also benefit. Example is lichen, which is a relationship between algae and mycorrhiza. And then we give examples of fungi, mushroom, which is common, penicillium, aspergillus. When you leave your bread or a stale bread that has been left outside in a moisture for some time, you see some black thing growing on it. That thing growing on it is a fungi. So we have aspergillus. Most of the time, that black thing is aspergillus that is growing on it most of the times. Then we have yeast, which is a medically important type of fungi. Yeast is a medically important type of fungi because most of them cause diseases. Then we have mold. We also have a type of yeast that we use in fermentation of palm wine or in production of ethanol. That is the one we call Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It is a type of yeast that is used during ethanol production or alcohol production. So, with this, we have come to the end of our discussion on fungi, and here is our assignment. So this is our assignment. You have to find out two examples of zygomycetes, ascomycetes, and basidiomycetes. Then two, then another one, you find an example of a fungi, one example that reproduces through budding. An example of a fungi that reproduces through budding. So these are the two questions in the assignments. Number one, find out example of zygomycete, ascomycete, and basidiomycete. And number 2, find out one example of fungi that reproduces through budding. Thank you.